The farm.
There was a king and queen who had 3 daughters. The 2 eldest were twins, Orangine and Rosette, and their parents loved them very much. They were beautiful and intelligent, but they were not very kind. In this they resembled the king and queen. The 3rd princess was called Rosette and was 3 years younger than her twin sisters. Rosette was as beautiful as her sisters, but she was kind and loving. The fairy Puissante was Rosette's godmother, and this made her 2 sisters, Orangine and Rosette, very jealous. They were angry because they had not a fairy as their godmother. A few days after birth of Rosette, her father sent her to grow up in the desert with a kind woman. There, Rosette lived for 15 years in happiness. During this period, her parents sent a yearly sum of money to the kind woman as living costs of their daughter, but they never went to see her. They never thought of her education. Rosette would indeed have been rude and ignorant if her good godmother, the fairy Puissante, didn't give her good education. In this way, Rosette learnt to read, write, calculate, play music, and speak some foreign languages. Rosette was really the most beautiful, the most attractive, the most amiable, and the most excellent princess in the whole world. One day when Rosette was setting in front of the house, a militant came and asked if he could speak to Princess Rosette. "Yes, without doubt," answered the princess. "I am Princess Rosette." The man said respectfully, taking off his hat, "Then, Princess, be graciously pleased to receive this letter, which the king asked me to deliver to you." Rosette took the letter, opened it, and read the following. Rosette, your sisters are now 18 years old, and it is good time for them to get married. I'll invite all princes and princesses from all over the world to come to choose husbands for your sisters. You are now 15 years old, and you can attend this festival. You may come and pass 3 days with us. I will send for you within 8 days. I cannot send you any money to buy new clothes, because I paid a lot of money for this festival, and nobody will look at you. Come therefore in any clothes you please. Your father, the king. Rosette ran quickly to show this letter to her nanny. Are you pleased, Rosette, to go to this festival? Yes, my nanny, I am so happy. I will enjoy myself and become acquainted with my father, mother, and my sisters. Then I will come back to you. But, said the nanny, shaking her head, what dress will you wear, my poor child? My beautiful white dress, which I always wear on holidays, my dear nanny. My poor girl, that dress is indeed very suitable for the countryside, but would appear miserably poor at a party of kings and princes. My father said that this is not important. No one will look at me. This will make me much more at ease. I shall see all, and no one will see me. The nanny sighed, but said nothing, and began immediately to mend, whiten, and smooth Rosette's white dress. The night before Rosette's travel, the nanny called her and said, My dear child, here is your dress for the king's festival. Be very careful with it, as I shall not be there to whiten and mend it for you. Thank you, my good nanny. Be satisfied that I will take great care. The nanny now packed in a small bag the dress and white skirt, a pair of cotton stockings, and black shoes. Then a little bouquet of flowers for Rosette to wear in her hair. Just as the nanny was about to close the bag, the window opened violently, and the fairy Puissante entered. You are going, then, to your father's court, my dear Rosette, said the fairy. Yes, dear godmother, but only for 3 days. Which dress have you prepared for those 3 days? Look, look! And she pointed to the bag, which was still open. The fairy smiled, drew a small bottle from her pocket, and said, I think that my dear Rosette shall draw attention by her dress. This dress is not good for her. The fairy opened the bottle and threw some drops of it on the dress, which became an Indian rough cloth. then a drop on the cotton stockings, which changed into blue yarn. A third drop on the bouquet, which became bigger. She continued, "In this manner, I wish my Rosette to appear. You must attire yourself in all this, and, to complete your good looking, here is a necklace and bracelets." She kissed Rosette and disappeared. Rosette and her nanny looked at each other in wonder, and the nanny burst into tears. "Alas, it was not good to waste my time and effort preparing this poor dress. Oh, my poor Rosette! Do not go to this festival. Pretend you are ill, my child." Rosette said, "No, that would displease my godmother. I am sure that she does what is best for me. She is much wiser than I am. I will go, and I will wear all that my godmother has brought me." The kind Rosette went to bed and slept tranquilly. She had scarce arranged her hair and dressed herself in the morning when the chariot of the king came to her. She embraced her nanny, took her small bag, and departed.
Rosette, at the palace of her father.
The first day. When Rosette arrived, she was surprised to see that she had to live in a little, dirty courtyard, where a maid attended her. "Come in, princess. I am ordered to take you to your chamber." Rosette asked timidly, "Can I see the queen, my mother?" "In 2 hours, princess, when we meet for dinner, you will see her. Now you can dress." Rosette followed the maid, who accompanied her through a long corridor, at the end of which was a narrow staircase. They ascended slowly, and after a long time they arrived at another corridor, where Rosette entered the room reserved for her. The maid placed Rosette's bag in a corner and said, with an air of embarrassment, "Pardon me, princess, for taking you into this small chamber so unworthy of you. The queen has disposed all other apartments for her guests, kings, queens, princes, and princesses. There were no other vacant rooms, and—" "Well, well," said Rosette, smiling, "it shall be very comfortable. I will come to you, princess, to accompany you to the king and queen at the proper hour." "I will be ready," said Rosette. "Goodbye, pretty maid." Rosette now opened her bag. She was astonished to see that her rough dress was made of gold and silk, embroidered with rubies of marvellous beauty. Her coarse, heavy shoes were now white satin, adorned with buckles of one single ruby of wonderful splendour. Her stockings were of silk and as fine as a spider's web. Her ruby's necklace was surrounded by large diamonds, and her diamond bracelets were wonderful. Rosette now ran to the mirror and saw that she was very beautiful. She danced around the little room and thanked her godmother aloud for having tested her obedience and thus magnificently rewarded it. The maid knocked at the door, entered, and was dazzled by the beauty of Rosette. Rosette followed her. They descended the stairs, passed through many apartments, and at last entered a suite of superb salons, filled with kings, queens, and nobles. Everyone who saw Rosette paused and turned to look at her. The modest princess, however, was ashamed to be thus gazed at, and did not dare raise her eyes. At last the maid paused and said to Rosette, "Princess, now you are in front of the king and the queen." Rosette raised her eyes and saw the king and queen. The king said, "Madame, be graciously pleased to tell me your name. You are, no doubt, a great queen or a greater fairy, whose unexpected presence is an honour and a happiness for us." "Sir," said Rosette, falling gracefully upon her knees, "I am neither a great queen nor a powerful fairy, but your daughter Rosette." "Rosette!" exclaimed the queen. "Rosette, clothed more magnificently than I have ever been. Who then, miss, has given you all these beautiful things?" "My godmother, madam. Graciously permit me, madam, to kiss your hand and present me to my sisters." The queen gave her hand coldly. Then, pointing to Orangine and Rosette, who were by her side, she said, "These are your sisters. poor Rosette, saddened by this cold welcome from her father and mother, turned gladly towards her sisters and wished to embrace them, but they drew back with terror, fearing that while embracing them, Rosette would remove the red and white colours off their faces. Orangine covered her face with white colour to conceal her yellow skin, and Rosette to hide her ugly freckles. Rosette was repulsed by her sisters, but was soon surrounded by ladies of the court and all the invited princes. As she talked freely and kindly and spoke several languages, she charmed all those who approached her. Orangine and Rosette were frightfully jealous. The king and queen were furious, for Rosette took all attention. No one paid any attention to the twin sisters. At the table, the young prince, Charmant, who was monarch of the most magnificent and beautiful of all the kingdoms of the earth, and whom Orangine hoped to wed, sat beside Rosette, and he was fascinated by her throughout the meal.
Family council.
While Rosette was busy with pleasant thoughts, the king, the queen, and the princesses Orangine and Rosette were choking with rage. They had all assembled in the queen's apartment. The princesses said, "This is too horrible. Why did you send for this Rosette, who has such dazzling jewels and makes herself admired and sought after by all these foolish kings and princes? Did you invite her to humiliate us, Dad?" "I swear to you, my beautiful girl," said the king, "that it was by the order of the Fairy Puissante. I was compelled to write asking her to come. Besides, I did not know that she was so beautiful and that—" "So beautiful," interrupted the princesses. "How do you find her so beautiful? She is indeed ugly and stupid. It is her magnificent dress which makes her admired. Why have you not given to us your most superb jewels and your richest robes? Where could I possibly find jewels as magnificent as hers? It is her godmother, the Fairy Puissante, who has lent her these jewels. Why, then, did you summon a fairy to be the godmother of Rosette, when you gave to us only queens for our godmother?" The king said, "It is not worthwhile to spend a lot of time in disputing and quarrelling. It is better to think of finding some means to get rid of Rosette and preventing Prince Charmant from seeing her again." "Nothing easier than that," said the queen. "Tomorrow I will have her despoiled of her rare jewels and clothes. I'll order my servants to take her back to the farm, which she shall never leave again." The queen had scarcely uttered these words when the Fairy Puissante appeared with an angry and threatening air. "If you dare to touch Rosette," said she with a thundering voice, "if you do not keep her at the palace, if she is not present at all the parties, you shall feel the terrible effects of my anger. You, unworthy king, and you, heartless queen, shall be turned into toads, and you, odious daughters and sisters, shall become vipers. Dare now to touch Rosette." Saying these words, she disappeared. The king, the queen, and princesses were horribly frightened and separated without saying a single word, but their hearts were filled with rage.
The second day.
In the morning, a fat servant brought Rosette bread and milk and offered her services to dress her and comb her hair. Rosette thanked her and replied that she used to comb and dress herself. Rosette then began to dress. When she had washed and combed her hair, she was surprised that the bag had disappeared, and in its place was a small wooden box, upon which there was a folded paper. She took it and read the following directions. "Here are your things, Rosette. Dress yourself as you were dressed yesterday, in the clothing you brought from the farm." When Rosette was about to leave her room to follow the maid, a melodious voice whispered in her ear, "Rosette, don't ride any other horse than that Prince Charmant will present to you." "Thanks, dear godmother," she whispered. The little maid conducted her as the day before into the royal salon, where her appearance caused a greater effect than before. Her fine, sweet countenance and her magnificent dress captivated eyes and hearts. Prince Charmant, who was evidently expecting her, advanced to meet her, offered his arm and took her to the king and queen, who received her with more coldness than the day before. Orangine and Rosette were bursting with spite at the sight of the splendid appearance of Rosette. They would not even say good day to their sister. The young princess was embarrassed by this reception, but Prince Charmant, seeing her distress, approached and asked permission to be her companion. "It will be a great pleasure," replied Rosette awkwardly. After breakfast, they descended to the court for a ride on horseback. A servant came to Rosette leading a splendid black horse, but it was untamed. Prince Charmant said, "You must not ride this horse, princess. It will certainly kill you." He turned to the servant and said, "Bring another horse for the princess." "The king and the queen gave orders that the princess should ride no other horse than this," said the servant. At this the prince exclaimed, "Dear princess, wait but for a moment. I myself will bring you a horse worthy of you. I implore you not to ride this dangerous animal." "I will wait for your return," said Rosette, with a gracious smile. A few moments later, Prince Charmant appeared, riding a magnificent white horse. When Rosette wished to ride, the horse knelt down and rose quietly when she sat on the saddle. Prince Charmant jumped lightly upon his beautiful horse, Alezane, and went beside Princess Rosette. The king, the queen, and the princesses, who had seen this, were pale with rage, but they dared say nothing for fear of the fairy Puissante. Instead of following the chase, Prince Charmant and Rosette wandered in the beautiful shady walks of the forest, talking merrily and telling stories of their past lives. Prince Charmant said, "If the king, your father, has not allowed you to live in his palace, how is it that he has given you such beautiful jewels?" "It is to my godmother that I owe them," replied Rosette. She told Prince Charmant how she had been educated on a farm and that she was indebted to the fairy Puissante for everything that she learnt. Charmant told Rosette that he had been left as an orphan at the age of 7. The fairy Puissante had supervised his education. She had also sent him to the festivals given by the king, telling him he would find there the ideal wife he was seeking. He added, "In short, I believe, dear Rosette, that I have found in you the charming and ideal creature of whom the fairy spoke. Princess, accept to connect your life with mine and authorize me to ask your hand from your parents. Before answering, dear prince, I must get permission of my godmother, but be sure that I shall be happy to pass my life with you." The morning passed away in happiness, and they returned to the palace to dress for dinner. Rosette entered her room. Having undressed, she lay down on the bed and whispered, "My dear godmother, I must give a clear answer to Prince Charmant. Tell me what to do. I will obey you anyhow." "Say yes, my dear Rosette, to Prince Charmant," replied the soft voice of the fairy. "I arranged for this marriage. It was to make you meet Prince Charmant that I forced your father to invite you to this festival."
Third and last day of the festival.
On the morning of the third day there was a chariot race, the last hope to trap Rosette. Each chariot was to be drawn by 2 horses and driven by a lady. It was agreed to give Rosette a high chariot, drawn by 2 wild, untrained horses. The queen said, "Prince Charmant will have no chariot and horses to exchange, as he did yesterday. It is impossible for him to find a chariot ready for the race." The thought that Rosette might be killed or wounded and disfigured brought satisfaction to these 4 wicked beings. On entering the salon, Rosette saw Prince Charmant, who was impatiently waiting for her. He jumped forward to receive her, offered his arm, and said with eagerness, "Well, dear princess, what did the fairy say to you? What answer do you give me?" That which my heart dictated, dear Prince, I consecrate my life to you as you have dedicated yours to me. Thank you, dear and bewitching Rosette. When may I ask your hand of your father, the king? At the end of the chariot race, dear Prince. Permit me to add that the wedding will be tonight. I cannot bear to see you suffer from tyranny of your family, and I wish to take you instantly to my kingdom. Rosette hesitated. The soft voice of the fairy whispered in her ear, "Accept." The same voice whispered to Charmante, "Be quick, dear Prince, and speak to the king without delay. Rosette's life is in danger, and after sunset of this evening I cannot care for her." Charmante trembled and repeated the fairy's words to Rosette, who replied that it was a warning they must not neglect, as it is from the fairy Puissante. Rosette now advanced to salute the king, the queen and her sisters, but they neither looked at her nor spoke to her. She was immediately surrounded by a crowd of kings and princes. Each one of them hoped to ask her hand in marriage that evening, but no one had an opportunity to speak to her. Charmante never left her side for a moment. After the meal, they went down to get into the chariots. The kings and princes were to go on horseback, and the ladies to drive the chariots. The chariot which the queen prepared for Rosette was now brought forward. Charmante held Rosette at the moment she was about to ride the chariot, and stopped her. "You won't enter this chariot, princess. Look at these wild, ungovernable horses." Rosette now saw that 4 men hold each horse, and that they were jumping alarmingly. At this moment, a young jockey and a small chariot, drawn by 2 magnificent horses, drew up in front of the princess. Charmante scarcely knew whether to allow Rosette to ride this unknown chariot, for he still feared some cunning wickedness of the king and queen. But the voice of the fairy sounded in his ear. "Allow Rosette to ride the chariot. These horses are a present from me. Follow them wherever they may take, Rosette. Time is passing. I have but a few hours left in which I can be of use to Rosette. She must be safe in your kingdom before end of the day." Charmante helped Rosette to ride the chariot and jumped on his horse. A few moments later, 2 chariots driven by veiled women advanced in front of Rosette's chariot. One of them collided her chariot violently with that of Rosette, which would inevitably have been crushed had it not been made by fairies. The heavy, huge chariot was dashed to pieces. The veiled woman was thrown upon the stones, where she remained immovable, whilst Rosette, who had seen her sister Orangine, tried to stop her own horses. The other chariot now rushed to that of Rosette and was crushed like the first, and the veiled woman was also injured. Rosette saw Rosette and was about to descend from her chariot when Charmante interfered and said, "Wait, Rosette." A voice whispered, "Go, run away quickly. The king is pursuing you with soldiers to kill both of you. The sun will set in a few hours. I have a short time to rescue you from this danger. So, leave your horse and jump in the chariot." Charmante jumped into the chariot beside Rosette. The horses set off with such marvellous speed that the king, with a numerous armed men, could not overtake the horses of the fairy. The whole palace of Charmante was illuminated, and all the courtiers were waiting at the entrance in their most magnificent costumes to welcome the princess and the prince. The prince and Rosette were amazed by this unexpected reception, but they saw the fairy Puissante before them, who said, "Most welcome to your kingdom. Prince Charmant, follow me. Everything is prepared for your marriage." The fairy led Charmant and Rosette to an apartment ornamented with the most exquisite taste, where she found her maids waiting to attend upon her. The fairy said, "I will return to see you in a short time, my dear Rosette. My moments are counted." She departed with Charmant and said to him, The hatred of the king and queen to Rosette had become so wild that they had blindly agreed to defy my vengeance and get rid of Rosette. Seeing that their cunning arrangements in the chariot race had not succeeded after my horses replaced those which would have killed Rosette, they decided to use violence. The king employed a band of soldiers who swore a blind obedience. They pursued your steps. As the king knew your love for Rosette and foresaw that you would defend her, he decided to sacrifice you also. Orangine and Rosette, ignorant of this last plan of the king, attempted to kill Rosette, as you have seen, by colliding their heavy chariots violently against the light chariot of the princess. But I severely tormented them. Orangine and Rosette had their faces so injured and wounded by the stones that they became frightful. I have aroused them from their state of unconsciousness, cured their wounds, but left the hideous scars to disfigure them. I deprived them of all their expensive clothing and dressed them like peasants. I married them to 2 brutal husbands whom I ordered to beat and maltreat them until their wicked hearts are changed. Regarding the king and queen, I turned them into beasts and given them to wicked and cruel masters. I have an advice for you, dear prince. Keep the punishment I have inflicted upon the parents and sisters of Rosette a secret. Rosette is so good and tender-hearted that her happiness would be affected by this news. I ought not and will not take pity upon wicked people whose hearts are so vicious and unrepentant.